Welcome back to Life Vidalia Technical Workshop on the conservation of endemic flora, and thank you again for joining us today. My name is Katia Freitas, and I'm Life Vidalia Co-Project Manager, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Just some quick notes before we begin. We are recording this session, and we will use some contents following the workshop. I kindly ask you to keep your microphones and videos disabled, and any questions you may have, please use the chat. We started our morning session with a welcoming note from Mr. Regional Secretary of Environment and Climate Change, Alonso Miguel, followed by Sandrine Godefroid from May's Botanic Garden on translocations of endangered plant species, facts, problems, and needs. Hanno Schaffer from Technical University of Munich on challenge for conservation of Azorian endemics. Juli Corrapel Castells from Botanic Garden Vieira e Clavijo on conservation of the flora in the Canary Islands, examples from the genus Lotus, and ended our morning session with Francisco Fernandes from Institute of Forest and Nature Conservation in Madeira on improving the resilience of Porto Santo Islands dune ecosystems to the impacts of climate change, live dunas. We will begin the program for this afternoon with the presentation of Life Vidalia project by Pedro Casimiro, the project manager, followed by 3 videos presenting the works of the project on a virtual visit format. After each video, we will have 15 minutes for discussion, so any questions you may have, we will be able to answer at this time. So, Pedro, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Katia. So I will share my screen right away. Okay, so are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will just do a quick presentation on the project Life Vidalia. So Life Vidalia is a life project implemented by the Regional Secretariat for the Environment and Climate Change as a coordinating beneficiary, and as associate beneficiary, the Regional Directory for the Environment and Climate Change. The total budget is close to 1.8 million euros for 5 years. It had 75% co-financement by the European Community, and it's located in the Azores in Portugal, and has for its main goal the preservation of 2 endemic Azorian plants protected and priority for conservation, which are Zurina Vidalia and Lotus Azarikus. The intervention islands are located in the central group of the Azores. So the project intervenes in all Natura 2000 network sites where the target species occur within the islands of Fayal, Pico, and São Jorge. The circles here in the image illustrate where our intervention areas are located. Before the beginning of the project, the most worrying problems identified were the reduced native populations, the presence of invader alien species, the reduction of the quality of the surrounding habitat, and the lack of awareness for the relevance of these species on global biodiversity conservation goals. So it was then clear that these were the main problems we needed to tackle. So Life Vidalia operational works include the reinforcement of the both target species reinforcements and also their companion species. The invader alien species control and eradication is really one of the tasks that we are involved, and one of the tasks that the more energy is invested on. So we are intervening in all intervention areas and in the buffer areas around the populations of the target species, and of course the regular monitoring of the project developments, just so we can adjust accordingly. The works that take place on the intervention areas are then supplemented by the works done on the rare plant nursery in the Fayal Botanic Garden, where the target and the companion species seeds are sown, and the resulting plants are safe until they are ready to be used in population reinforcement actions. So the nursery enlargement and adaptation works that Life Vidalia foresaw and undertook allow for a more efficient plant propagation, and until now, these nurseries have produced more than 80,000 native plants for our works in the project. Engaging the community and stakeholders, it's also an extremely important part of our project, and it is essential for its success. Therefore, we include activities directed at various audiences like school children, tourism agents, NGOs, and third sector organizations all over the archipelago. Besides, our project includes also a series of communication and awareness raising materials and tools that allow for further engagement. This includes the itinerant exhibition, teachers' activities and resources guide, notice boards that can be found in our intervention areas. These are complemented, of course, by online engagement on our website and Facebook page, where we post information and updates on the project advances. And of course, this workshop is also part of our program for the dissemination of results and methods. So thank you very much for your attention. Katia, please.
Hello, thank you, Pedro. So we will present the first video on the target species and habitat trends, and any questions that you may have, you can put on the chat, and you can write it on the chat, and after we will answer. Just
Zurina vidali is the sole species of the endemic genus Zurina, and the only representative of the Campanulaceae family in the Azores native flora. It's a perennial small shrub that grows on a narrow strip along the coastline and also on rocky and abrupt slopes up to 50 meters. Ribeirinha is a good example of vegetated sea cliffs
a treasure in terms of coastal vegetation, with the presence of both target species but also other rare endemics like Pericalis malvifolia and Amice hubertianum. Vidalia is the most iconic and precious Azorian plant. That's why we use it for education and public awareness. Each plant produces thousands of small sticky seeds, mainly dispersed by wind at late summer. Massive germination can be observed during winter and spring, but only a few plants survive the dry season. Vidalia is able to colonize many different kinds of substrates, but requires supply of underground water.
Although they exist in the coast of all islands, the population consists of few individuals. It's severely fragmented and shows a general decrease in numbers. Fajanda Ribeira da Areia is one of those rare cases where the endemic flora and habitats are dominant in the coastal area.
Vidalia grow in the midst of endemic Festuca petraea meadows, accompanied by several coastal species like Critmo maritimo, which is an habitat companion and a good indicator for places for introductions, Euphorbia azorica and Silene uniflora, and next to important Macaronesian hiss of Erica azorica, Murella faia, and Juniperus brevifolia.
You can clearly see the transition between the tidal area to the fields dominated by Festuca petraea, and then the transition to the Macaronesian hiss, dominated here by Erica azorica. This could be the most common landscape that humans encountered when they arrived in the Azores.
Lotus Azarikus is an endemic plant that belongs to the Fabaceae family and can only be found in coastal areas. It is estimated that there are between 5,000 and 10,000 individuals, and the numbers show a declining trend. Numbers of these species vary from season to season and from year to year. Populations are scarce and usually concentrated in one specific location. Sometimes, neighboring areas of populations with apparently the same conditions don't have Lotus Azoricus growing.
This is the biggest population within the project area. In good years, Lotus Azoricus forms thick blankets like we can see here. Plants grow between the sea, the waves, and the exotic, more competitive vegetation. Usually, though, Lotus Azoricus plants are not as vigorous as these ones. They can be found growing together with Zacutus, which is a good indicator for its habitat. But recently, team members have found new locations never found before growing in the south coast, proving that capacity building efforts are well rewarded.
Several impacts of human origin, such as habitat loss, invasive species, overexploitation, or climate change, severely affect the survival of species in the Azores and in the other Macaronesian islands. Vidalia and Lotus habitats are usually very degraded. They have been destroyed or occupied by urban development and agriculture. Both species seem to like the same habitat as humans. Most areas of the project deal with the remains of these populations in marginal habitats. All intervention areas are invaded with alien species. They are the main threat for native biodiversity. Extreme climatic events like Hurricane Lorenzo in October 2019 affect the entire coastline, but also inland vegetation. Entire populations have been washed and stripped out, as well as its soil substrate. After cleaning operations by project team during the following winter, Soil Seed Bank provided stock for germination, showing the species' resilience even in dramatic conditions. It may come as a surprise that Vidalia exists here at 300 meters in altitude, far from the coastline. It grows in crevices facing south inside this crater. This population had about 20 individuals. Today, the 164 plants growing in the area are the proof that conservation efforts towards resilient species can bring brighter perspectives for long-term species survival. With the contribution of LIFE program of the European Union.
Hello, once again. So we just finished with our first video. Any questions you may have, please use the chat. Thank you, Hanno. Thank you. So maybe if we don't have any questions. Oh, so we have here one question. Hanno is asking if we have any idea about the natural seed disperser of Lotus. Pedro, would you like to answer?
Yes, I can try. Um, as far as we have seen, it's self dispersed, so autochoric. We don't know any. Well, we know that rats they get the fruits and eat them. So we will see an image where we can see many fruits in one place. So probably they carry some of these seeds elsewhere. But other than that, I would say also that this strong sea, sometimes the strong sea may carry the seeds to another location close to the initial one, but this well probably it's very few seeds and it's merely a question of luck, but yeah, this is probably, as far as I know, these are probably the dispersal processes.
Okay, thank you. And Luis Jordão is asking, could you go a bit deeper on if there were changes on the perception of stakeholders and in what sense? Pedro?
Well, we are in contact with various stakeholders and especially groups of school children that are involved more on a more regular basis. Of course, they are much. We really find differences. They get to know the species quite well, the objectives whenever they go to any intervention areas to do some whatever work we propose them to do. So yes, cult children are yes the group, the best group. Also tourism companies that work on these areas and use some of these areas to visit with their tourists. They are very interested. Well, I wouldn't say the majority, but those more focused on biodiversity and that use biodiversity as a tool for their work. Yes. Some municipalities are really keen on participating on the efforts of our project. So yes, I would say some good examples of involvement of stakeholders are already visible. Yeah.
And Paulo Ventura Araújo is asking, can you talk about newly discovered Myosotis maritima populations? Are they also being reinforced?
Yes, Paulo, thank you for that question. And I know it is of your concern, Myosotis maritima, and yes, we are using Myosotis maritima in some of our actions. You've seen some images of plants that we reintroduced in nature, also taking the same care that we do with Lotus and the Zurina, Vidalia, and all the plants we use, respecting the genetic origin. But yes, with Zurina and Lotus, we are also using Myosotis, not as a species that is able to colonize areas where the invader plants were controlled and to compete with them, not in that objective, but to reinforce these natural populations of Myosotis. We have found, well, this is a good year of Myosotis azorica, of Myosotis maritima, sorry. We can find them, in all populations we know, there are good numbers of these species. And we haven't found new locations so far, so we are just using the material from the source locations we have identified from the beginning of the project.
Okay, so thank you. I don't know if anyone has any more questions about this first video and the presentation. So we'll moving on to the second video. Okay. So Ricardo Chaves is asking, are there any plans to extend the protection of Zurina in other islands? Pedro?
Well, Zurina is protected in all islands. The focus of Life Vidalia project is on these three islands, Faial, Pico, and São Jorge. That's where our intervention areas are, but it is under the scope of the project to adapt these works to other islands. So it will be a reality from now on, more close to the end of the project and in the project afterwards. So yes, we intend. It's part of the objectives of the project to have this, not with the means of the project, but to pass on the information and the methodology and whatever we learned with the project to other areas in the archipelago and in other archipelagos even. So it's good to have this Macaronesian approach where we can exchange this information and adapt the lessons learned to other areas.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Okay. So if anybody has more questions, I kindly ask you to write it down now.
Well,
Okay.
let me just add, sorry, Katia, that of course we have Azores Life IP, Azores Natura, which deals with this kind of works as well, with this species and other species in all the islands of the Azores. So this project is also a guarantee that this kind of works will develop in other areas of the Azores. Sorry, Katia.
No, that's okay. So we will move on to the next video. So if you have any more questions, please use the chat. Our next video is about our in situ conservation actions.
Morro de Castelo Branco is one of the most impressive landscapes in Fayal. It's a volcanic trachytic dome with well-preserved coastal endemic habitats, and it is an important nesting site for seabirds. Here, we have been applying different conservation techniques for a long period of time. Today, it is one of Fayal's main attractions and an example of sustainable development. But it wasn't always that way. 20 years ago, it was a dump place, like we can see here in old photographs. It was almost completely invaded with invader plants, especially Arundodonax cane, but also Carpobrotus edulis. They covered 60 or 70% of this area. Invasive plants control is the first step in conservation actions. It is a very demanding task in both well-preserved and degraded areas. After controlling one invasive species, another takes its place, so it's a big effort until invaders are replaced by native vegetation. Vidalia and Lotus populations are directly reinforced by plantation with plants from the nursery. The objective is to establish new and stable nuclei. As we can see here with Lotus, reintroductions also occur in cases where the original population is threatened or in decline. From here, we obtain extra seeds for propagation. Rabbits are particularly aggressive to Lotus, which represents a nutritious food source almost all year round. Plantations must therefore be protected. Rats are a threat to both target species, but also to the whole ecosystem. Innovative non-chemical traps are being widely used. Interventions in relatively well-kept areas achieve the best results. Invasive species removal is usually followed by natural regeneration of native vegetation. Renaturalizing disturbed areas is a greater challenge. Native vegetation is almost absent and substrate is profoundly changed. In these cases, we plant large numbers of companion species which are able to compete with invaders. For pastures conversion, we have a different approach, much more prolonged in time. Erica azorica is planted in order to re-establish the Macaronesian hiss in 15 or 20 years. Direct seedling has proven to be effective with Lotus. New nuclei have been established with this technique. This is one of the most emblematic intervention areas here. We are in the original nucleus of Zurina Vidalia, and basically here the system is relatively intact. It was, well, quite invaded with some invader plants, which we removed, including this fern, this exotic fern called Sirtomium falcatum. We removed this plant before the seeding season last year. And this year, we managed to see a big offspring of little Zurina Vidalia plants right in the place where we removed these ferns from. Conservation goals are only achieved through constant maintenance with capacitated staff. It is possible to reverse the loss of species and habitats, even in degraded areas. This is an ongoing process that cannot stop. Projects like Life Vidalia provide the necessary means to develop these actions in the long term. With the contribution of LIFE program of the European Union. With the contribution of LIFE program of the European Union.
So this was our second video. We have already here one question from Sonia Malveiro. She's asking, all the invaders were removed manually. So Pedro, if you'd like to answer.
Yes. Well, in 99% of the cases, yes. In 1% of the cases, we had to use chemicals. In cases where the substrate does not allow manual intervention, like very rocky and invaded with very difficult species. Like there is one species called Salpicroa origanifolia. It's a melliferous plant, and it's almost impossible to control. So in these very specific cases, yes, but we always use well, sometimes in Rundodonax as well, in growing in very rocky substrates. Rundodonax have these rhizomes, very powerful, that you have to either take out from the soil, or there isn't much opportunity other than the chemical use, but we hardly use any chemicals, really.
Joana Betancourt is asking, which exotic species would you consider to be most invasive in these habitats?
Well, the species that were most well established were Rundodonax, Carpobrotus edulis. This was the more abundant species. After we remove, for instance, Carpobrotus edulis, it's not so difficult to control. Well, it's not. It's one of, I wouldn't say one of the easiest, but you can control it with not so much difficulty. But after Carpobrotus, for instance, Tetragonia, Tetragonoids comes and they invade everything. So then we have another species covering the same area, but a different one. It also occurs that, for instance, in Monte da Guia, we took Gramão, Stenotaphorum, and then the Penicetum vaginatum, which is another kind of grass, took over. So it's kind of a very difficult, it's a complex dynamics, this one of the invaders. But well, we have a whole set of invaders present in many different conditions. But yeah, Arundu, Carpobrotus, now Tetragonia, and of course Penicetum clandestino. I must mention it here. It's not a real. It doesn't cover much area at this stage, but we can see that it's one of the most aggressive plants that we know. It's another grass widely used in gardens because it forms a nice green blanket, and it's extremely invasive. So when it goes to pastures, the farmers collect it to preserve it for cattle feeding. They transport this plant to other pastures, and then it gets installed there, and it invades everything. It's really something that we should worry about, this Penicetum clandestinum. So basically, yeah. But we have lots of invaders other than these ones.
Hannah Schaffer was asking, do you get long-term support from the government for management monitoring of these places after the end of the LIFE project? Pedro, could you please turn on your camera?
Sure, sorry, just now. Well, so when the government signed this agreement, it is in the agreement that the 5 years after the end of the project are the maintenance of these areas are guaranteed. So for 5 years, we have, well, not all the means, but the structure assumes the maintenance of these areas. But as, well, a regional authority, these areas will be always part of the management. So I can't talk by future future authorities, but up to now, yes, there is the commitment of that these areas will be the actions in these areas will be continued in time. Yeah.
And Nuno Ponte is asking how effective has hodent control in this area using the good nature traps.
So the threat of rats in our target species are well indirect, or they directly affect the species. They both Lotus and Vidalia seeds, fruits and seeds are a food source for rats. It's well, it's a threat. It's not one of the most important threats, but it's a threat. It's also a threat for, well, the integrity of the whole ecosystem. They also feed on leaves of especially live Vidalia, and the effectiveness. So we have done a trial last year using 10 of these traps, and most of the areas are close are the areas are not very big, and they are close either to urban areas or agriculture areas. So the reps keep coming in. So you always get a new supply of animals, no matter how many rats you can, well, kill with these traps. So they keep coming in the areas. So we have a stable, more or less a stable numbers of what's the word, kills of rodents in these areas. The traps showed, well, good control, not fully successful. They still have, although they are self-resetting, and they go to up to 24 shots. They have a canister with air, so the machine resets itself. But they need constant maintenance, and we now have 100 of these traps all in the areas of the project, and it's we are still from 2 months now, and we are still adapting our way of using these traps. But so far, in 2 months we got almost 500 rodents controlled. So well, that's an average of five catch per month per trap. So it's not a spectacular number, but, well, that's an average number so far.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, so we probably can move to the third and last video. Okay, so no more questions. Our last video is about ex situ conservation actions.
Welcome to Fayal Botanic Garden. This is where the ex situ conservation actions of the Life Vidalia project take place. The Botanic Garden of Fayal was created in 1986. It is an interpretation center belonging to the regional government of the Azores. From its beginning, its mission is to contribute to the knowledge, the dissemination of that knowledge, and the conservation of the flora of the Azores. Ex situ conservation measures occur outside the natural areas. The Botanic Garden keeps a complete collection of coastal endemic flora. Azores Seed Bank conserves seed samples of Azorean flora, and the Rare Plants Nursery provides plants for conservation actions. Besides the living plant collection, seed banking is a basic tool for species conservation. Under Life Vidalia, the improvement of the germination protocol for Lotus Azarikus is one of the objectives.
The first trials with Lotus Azarikus, one of the project target species, showed a 34% success rate. We also had a protocol using sulfuric acid that showed a success rate above 90%. But acid is not a safe material to handle in the nurseries nor the seed bank, especially with the amount of propagations protocol needed. So we looked at the natural habitat and tried to figure out what was causing the abrasive effect that the seed needed to germinate. We figured out that probably was the rocks on the natural habitats and tried to replicate it in the laboratory using sandpaper. After, with this new protocol, we had a success rate of 84% and a safer protocol was adapted to the nurseries.
In order to guarantee the necessary number of plants of both the target species but also the companion species in the habitat, we had to improve the capacity of the nursery. So an investment has been done in infrastructures, in building new areas of production. We have produced around 80,000 companion species plants, almost 9,000 Zurina Vidalia, and 4,000 Lotus Azarikus. Those plants have already been introduced on field. We have to develop the best protocol here in the nursery so we can produce the target plant. Zurina Vidalia, for instance, we have realized that the plants at this stage, planted early in the season in October, November, guarantee the best survival rates in the field. Lotus, on the other hand, we have much less experience with, so we are still learning how to deal with this plant to establish permanent and viable populations in the field. In order to respect the genetic origin of each plant, a tight control is guaranteed throughout the whole process, from seed collection, seed banking, propagation here in the nursery, and when returning those plants to the original population, so that the genetics don't get mixed and future studies will still be possible. With the contribution of LIFE program of the European Union.
So this was our last video. Any questions you may have, please use the chat. So Hannah Schaffer is asking, do you know how long-lived the Lotus seeds are? Is it a seed bank species? So I can answer this one. Yes, it's one of the species that we have on the seed bank. We've done trials before banking the seeds, after dehydrate them, and after 1 month in on the chamber, after 1 month being banked. So all indicates that it will germinate well. We will do more tests in a few months, but is one of the species listed to be banked.
Katia, if you can I make a comment?
Yes.
After Lorenzo hurricane, for instance, in Calheta do Nesquim, all that population disappeared. So the waves came in shore, and it was completely all the plants. Only two plants survived. So we were kind of anxious what could happen with that population, and so Lorenzo was in the beginning of October. So the team went there and cleaned and removed all the garbage and etc. And after 2 months after, we could see massive germination of Lotus Azarikus. It was incredible. So answering your question, yes, I would say yes. It's a seed banker. Uh, yes, I think so.
Also, the seeds that are using on the nurseries are seeds that are kept in the refrigerator for um, up to 3 years. So I guess it's a good indicator. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Okay, so Sonia Malveiro is asking, when you plant the seedlings, the survival is high in the field, Pedro?
Um, so far, we tested several target plants, and as I showed in the video, the best one we had so far, it's already a young adult plant, already.
Pedro, your mic it's off.
Sorry. Um, so we have been testing several target plants, especially with the Zurina, which is a species that lives for many years. And as I tell in the video, so far the best target plant is a young adult that is already branching. So plants between 7, 8 months to 1 year, or a bit more. Those plants are the ones that have the best survival rate, and but we didn't manage so far to have those plants in the field. The trials we made have when I say very, it's higher than 80% of success in the field. This year we produced a lot of younger plants that we put it on the field, because we didn't have much time from last summer until the planting season that starts in October and November. So we tried to use younger plants, seedlings with some months old, and this didn't have a very good percentage of success. I would say something like 20 or 30% of success. So I wouldn't say this is the best technique. So we are now producing the plants to plant in the field next autumn. But it's another challenge to make them survive in the nursery throughout the summer, because we have many plants dying in the summer in the nursery. So this is also a process that we have to to make better. With Lotus, they go well. They establish well in well in like in a garden. So you saw an image in Feijão dos Cubres. It's almost like a vegetable garden with lotus. So with good substrate and in a protected condition. But we know that if we leave that those plants at their own luck, all the vegetation will not invaders, but other vegetation will take over, and the Lotus Azarikus plants won't be able to survive in that place on the long term. So um, the habitat for lotus, it's really something difficult to know where exactly to put the plants, because it's such a specific habitat that it's really hard to figure out which is well the best area. Sometimes the areas don't have hardly have any substrate, so it's still a process. But the ones that we plant on the field, they have a very good survival rate.
Okay, so Sofia Freitas was asking if the videos were available. They will be available on our channels, Facebook and website. Maria Lourdes Costa asked if can we establishment the seed life duration with, for example, germination tests? Yes, we can do multiple germination tests after a while, but we, for instance, for Lodge and some of the projects species, we know that up to 3 to 4 or 5 years we can keep the seeds viable if they're kept on the refrigerator, more if they go to the seed bank. Hope I answer your question. And Hannah Schaffer was saying that I saw that on Flores in Santa Maria there are efforts to use Lotus and Zurina as ornamentals along the parking space in Feijão Grande and São Lourenço. Do you support this? Does it help, or is it hard for the plants to survive there? Pedro?
Well, we are not supporting this, but what can I say? In some areas, we are well, not in Flores and Santa Maria. No, it's not part of. It's not something that I'm involved in. In Fayal, some of the areas we are doing interventions, we use Zurina almost as an ornamental plant. So these are areas with lots of human presence. So we plant Zurinas in places almost as ornamentals. Not only with the aim of well, establishing a stable population in that environment, but to put these plants closer to people. So in a way of showing that this plant, it's a valuable plant for as an ornamental purpose, and to use it as a symbol of our biodiversity. But yeah, as you said it before, and I totally agree with you, interventions in well-kept or relatively well kept habitats, that is the best that we can do. It's the easiest and with the best results. So intervening in very degraded areas, it's a lifetime challenge.
Luís Jordão asked if we are supporting identical measures in the target islands, but I guess you already partially answered before. And Paulo Araújo, wouldn't it be a good idea for the Botanic Garden of Fayal to sell endemic plants to private gardens?
Well, that's a discussion that we've been having for a long time. And with common endemic plants, we are not selling it. It's an idea we have, but we haven't reached that phase yet. But whenever we get extra plants of Murella faia or Festuca petrae or common plants that are easily found, we give some of we give or establish some kind of partnership for these plants. For protected species, my opinion is that we should engage stakeholders on using these species in their private gardens, but it must be, well, that's my opinion, of course. It's just my opinion. I'm talking for myself now. But anyway, in the project, we have those kinds of measures implemented, establishing special relations that private owners assume the responsibility of keeping those plants in their gardens, and not to offering those plants to a friend from the neighboring island. That's very important for us. So our idea when using these plants is that their keepers respect the origin of these plants. It's a romantic idea that everybody could use a Zurina in their private gardens. That's true, but then we will have we wouldn't be respecting the genetics of the species, and then this would have later this would later it would later affect
essas espécies todas para pôr nos jardins e não sei se isso vai dar fruto.
This would have later effects on studies. So that's it.
So Luís Jordão is asking, what about generating responsibility stewardship by keepers standing by side of natural populations? For example, that coffee you were talking nearby on the video.
Yes, that's right. Well, I had the chance of talking to the owner of that coffee when we were filming. Well, it really depends on the owner of the coffee. That one was wasn't really interested on those plants, but anyway, we have established some contacts with restaurants and so on close to the natural populations, and the receptiveness is good. I would say it is the best we can do so that people can get involved. Rat traps is very good for public engagement. So the people in the living close to our intervention areas are very happy that we are controlling rats in their gardens, let's say. So, and it's a good way to explain why they should keep those plants on their backyards or but we had some good examples, and we are through this Myosotis seal for lodgements in the Azores. Some lodgements have been awarded, and they are invited to become keepers of natural areas by monitoring the plants and the invaders that occur in these areas. So this is an ongoing process right now. So I believe that we will have more results in the short term. So yeah, it's this would be the best approach. That's for sure. So, and we are using it as much as we can, I would say. Schools, they are also involved. For instance, in Madalena, we had, and here in Fayal, Monte da Guia as well, schools have been really involved in actions of maintenance and of plantations and of recovery of some areas. So the schools that stand by these natural populations have been also involved with, I believe, good results.
So, Marta Pimentel is asking, what is the origin of Lotus Azarikus in Shinfayal Island, and why was it introduced?
Well, we keep a population of lotus growing in the botanic garden for some years now. Those plants come from Pico Island, from Manhães. So we decided to introduce them here more as a trial than anything else. But we would like, yes, to establish a stable population in Fayal. We didn't achieve it so far. So far, we managed to make some plants survive for some time, but by one reason or another, we didn't manage to well have a stable population. So it's good to have them close, not only in the garden but also in a natural area, to realize what is the process, how should we deal with these plants, to realize if there are any kinds of these specific habitats, other areas that the Lotus Azoricus it's possible to introduce. So this is the reason. But if possible, I think it's a good conservation goal to have to widen the populations of these kinds of plants to other places, as long as we respect their origin and assume its maintenance for on the long term. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, I guess not. Just give just a few more seconds if anybody wants to ask something. Okay, maybe not. So on behalf of Life Vidalia team, I would like to thank all of you for attending our workshop today, and I would like to invite you to check on our website, lifevidalia.eu, and Facebook page, life.vidalia. Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye. See you soon. Thank you.
Bye, Ricardo.
Tchau. Tchau, Francisco. Obrigado.
Tchau, tchau. Tchau, Pedro. E parabéns pelo trabalho. Muitos
Obrigado.
parabéns pelo vosso trabalho.
Obrigadíssimo.
Bye.
Tchau.